In January 1997, during a road game against the Timberwolves, Dennis Rodman, then leading the league with 16.1 rebounds per game, dives for a loose ball and kicks a cameraman in the groin. The incident unfolds courtside in full view of national TV cameras. Rodman is immediately ejected, and the NBA responds with an 11-game suspension and a $25,000 fine. He forfeits over $1 million in salary during the ban, which becomes one of the largest financial penalties for an on-court act at the time. The injured cameraman, Eugene Amos, files a civil suit that's quietly settled out of court for $200,000. The league's official statement cites Rodman's repeat behavior as the deciding factor. His fourth suspension in 2 years. Commissioner David Stern warns that future incidents could result in indefinite bans. The Bulls weather his absence and eventually win the 1997 title, but Rodman's legacy takes a hit. His rebound numbers remain elite, but his reputation as a liability becomes harder to shake. The next major suspension, far longer and far more infamous, erupts just 7 years later in Detroit. On November 19, 2004, with 45.9 seconds remaining in a Pacers-Pistons game, Ron Artest fouls Ben Wallace hard on a layup. A shoving match escalates, but just as things settle down, a cup of beer hurled from the stands strikes Artest, who's lying on the scorer's table. He charges into the crowd, punches a fan, and triggers the worst player-spectator brawl in NBA history. The melee spans 10 minutes, involves multiple players in the stands, and results in 13 arrests. The NBA suspends Artest for the remainder of the 2004-05 season, 86 games in total. Including the playoffs. It's the longest suspension ever handed down for an on-court incident not involving substance abuse. 4 other players also receive bans, bringing the total number of games lost to 146. Artest alone forfeits approximately $5 million in salary. Commissioner David Stern cites the necessity to protect the integrity of the game as justification. The Malice at the Palace marks a turning point in league security, leading to sweeping reforms in arena policies and fan conduct guidelines. It also redefines the NBA's disciplinary scale for violent acts, setting a precedent that echoes in future playoff suspensions. The next major suspension, unlike Artest's, doesn't come from a brawl, but from a single, costly, flagrant point. In the 2016 NBA Finals, Draymond Green, Golden State's defensive anchor and vocal leader, picks up his 4th flagrant foul point of the playoffs after a run-in with LeBron James in Game 4. The NBA retroactively upgrades the play to a flagrant one, triggering an automatic 1-game suspension under postseason accumulation rules. With the Warriors up 3-1 in the series, Green is forced to watch Game 5 from a luxury suite inside Oracle Arena. Without him on the floor, Golden State's defensive rating drops, and LeBron James and Kyrie Irving each explode for 41 points. Green returns for Game 6, but the momentum has shifted. James records another 41-point outing, while the Warriors shoot just 40% from the field. In Game 7, Golden State scores only 13 points in the final quarter as Cleveland completes the comeback. The suspension proves pivotal, not just statistically, but psychologically, as the league's best regular season team fails to close out at home. Golden State's 73-win campaign ends without a ring, and Green's absence becomes a flashpoint in NBA Finals lore. The fallout prompts Green to recruit Kevin Durant days later, reshaping the league's power structure. The next suspension doesn't swing a title, but it forces a franchise to rethink its future around a young star. On December 1, 1997, during a Warriors practice session, Latrell Sprewell, averaging 15.4 points per game at the time, gets into a verbal confrontation with head coach P.J. Carlesimo. Moments later, he physically assaults Carlesimo, grabbing him by the throat for roughly 10 seconds before being pulled away. The team immediately suspends Sprewell for 10 games without pay. But the NBA escalates the punishment to a full 82-game season ban, the longest suspension for a non-drug-related incident in league history at that point. Golden State voids the remaining 3 years of his contract, costing Sprewell $6.4 million in salary. The National Basketball Players Association appeals, calling the decision too harsh, and eventually wins a partial rollback. An arbitrator reduces the suspension to 68 games, allowing Sprewell to return in March 1999 during the lockout-shortened season, this time with the Knicks. He helps lead New York to an improbable finals run as an 8th seed, but the incident haunts his reputation for years. The league's response sets a disciplinary benchmark for violent conduct, one the NBA rarely touches again until the post-Malice era. In December 2009, Gilbert Arenas, then averaging 22.6 points per game for the Washington Wizards, brings multiple firearms into the team's locker room following a dispute with teammate Javaris Crittenton over a gambling debt. The incident violates the NBA's strict firearm policy, implemented in 2005 after the league banned all weapons from team facilities. Days later, Arenas compounds the issue by miming finger guns during pre-game introductions, prompting swift backlash and intensifying public scrutiny. NBA Commissioner David Stern suspends Arenas indefinitely on January 6th, and after a month-long investigation, hands down a 50-game ban without pay. The suspension ends Arenas' season and costs him nearly $7.5 million in salary. He also pleads guilty to a felony gun charge and receives 2 years of probation. Though Arenas returns the following year, he never regains All-Star form and is traded to Orlando in December 2010. The NBA's handling of the case reasserts its zero-tolerance stance on firearms, especially in the wake of image-sensitive reforms post-Malice. The next suspension won't involve weapons, but it will derail a rookie campaign before it even begins. On November 8, 2021, reigning MVP Nikola Jokic blindsides Markieff Morris with a hard shove to the back during a dead ball in a Nuggets Heat game. The incident begins after Morris delivers a take-foul elbow to Jokic's ribs, prompting the retaliation. Jokic is ejected and later suspended 1 game, forfeiting $210,000 in salary. Morris suffers whiplash and misses 58 games. Jokic, meanwhile, misses no momentum. He finishes the year with 27.1 points, 13.8 rebounds, and his second MVP trophy. The confrontation spills online. Marcus Morris tweets, "Wait till bro turns his back," prompting Jokic's brothers Strahinja and Nemanja to create a Twitter account defending Nikola and warning retaliation. Days later, the brothers buy courtside seats in Miami ahead of a potential rematch, fueling media coverage and player security concerns. The league avoids further escalation, but the moment exposes how fast off-court threats can amplify on-court tensions. Despite the uproar, Jokic's season rolls on, untouched by further discipline. The NBA, wary of piling on its MVP, limits punishment while keeping tabs on social spillover. The next headline suspension, though, doesn't come from an MVP, but from a Finals MVP with a reputation to protect. In the 2007 Western Conference semifinals, the Suns and Spurs are deadlocked at 2-2 when a hard foul by Robert Horry on Steve Nash sends the MVP into the scorer's table with 18 seconds left in Game 4. In response, Amara Stoudemire and Boris Diaw take a few steps onto the court before being pulled back without escalating the incident. But the NBA's rule is clear. Any player who leaves the bench during an altercation is subject to an automatic one-game suspension. The league enforces it without exception, sidelining both Stoudemire and Diaw for a pivotal Game 5. Phoenix, playing without their 20.4 points per game big man and key playmaker, loses Game 5 at home by just 3 points. The Spurs take a 3-2 series lead and close it out in 6, eventually winning the championship. Suns fans argue the punishment lacks nuance and disproportionately alters the series outcome. To this day, the incident fuels conspiracies about league bias and playoff officiating. But the rule itself remains intact, unchanged, and unbending, setting the stage for the next star to test its limits. In the 2014 Western Conference first round, the 7th-seeded Memphis Grizzlies pushed the 2nd-seeded Oklahoma City Thunder to a decisive Game 7. But just before the final showdown, Zach Randolph, the team's leading scorer at 18.4 points per game, is suspended for elbowing Thunder center Steven Adams late in Game 6. The league retroactively rules it a punch and hands Randolph a one-game suspension along with a $25,000 fine. Video evidence is limited, and the decision stirs debate among players, analysts, and fans alike. Without Randolph, the Grizzlies collapse in Game 7, managing just 84 points on 36% shooting. Oklahoma City dominates the glass and advances behind Kevin Durant's 33-point performance. The suspension effectively ends Memphis's upset bid and raises questions about postseason disciplinary timing. Unlike previous high-profile bans, Randolph's comes without a full review process or clear footage, amplifying frustration. The next case, however, won't hinge on video but on an accidental shove that ends a playoff run before it starts. In the fallout of the 2004 Malice at the Palace, Stephen Jackson receives the second heaviest suspension, 30 games without pay. As the melee spills into the stands, Jackson, then averaging 18.7 points per game for Indiana, throws multiple punches at fans while defending teammate Ron Artest. The NBA reviews game footage from multiple angles and sites Jackson's aggressive and repeated behavior as justification for the lengthy suspension. He forfeits an estimated $1.7 million in salary during the ban. Unlike Artest, Jackson expresses little regret. Years later, in interviews, he calls his actions worth it and frames the incident as an act of loyalty. His image hardens into that of an enforcer, one who blurs the line between teammate protection and escalation. The suspension effectively derails Indiana's title hopes that year and casts a long shadow over Jackson's otherwise productive career. The league's disciplinary arm, meanwhile, tightens its language around fan interaction, leading to stricter security and quicker officiating responses. In February 1998, Sacramento Kings forward Chris Webber is arrested at a Washington, D.C. airport after TSA discovers 11 grams of marijuana in his bag. At the time, Webber is in the middle of a standout season, averaging 20.1 points and 9.8 rebounds per game. The NBA responds with an 8-game suspension and a $500,000 fine, one of the steepest penalties for marijuana possession in league history to that point. The league cites conduct detrimental to the NBA and begins quietly re-evaluating its substance enforcement framework. Webber's suspension coincides with growing pressure from league owners and sponsors to take a tougher stance on off-court behavior. The following year, the NBA updates its substance policy, increasing fines and shortening appeals for drug-related offenses. Webber returns to the lineup and eventually earns All-NBA honors. But the incident lingers during his transition to franchise. Centerpiece in Sacramento. The episode underscores how off-court incidents, even in non-violent contexts, can provoke wide-ranging policy shifts. The next suspension, though, doesn't come from drugs but from a finals MVP going rogue in a contract dispute. In October 2015, Matt Barnes travels 95 miles to confront then Knicks assistant coach Derek Fisher at a home in Redondo Beach. The reason isn't basketball. Fisher is reportedly dating Barnes' estranged wife. What starts as a personal confrontation turns physical, with reports of a scuffle involving not only Fisher but also other Knicks personnel present. The altercation gains national attention and forces the NBA to formally investigate the off-court conduct. By January 2016, the league hands Barnes a 2-game suspension without pay, citing violations of its personal conduct policy. Though the incident occurs away from the team, the league holds him accountable for the public fallout and optics. Barnes forfeits over $60,000 in salary and draws criticism across the league but publicly states, "No regrets." The league's handling signals that off-court drama with direct ties to league personnel will not be exempt from disciplinary review. The NBA's willingness to discipline for personal disputes marks a shift in how image, relationships, and public perception influence suspension decisions. The next case involves a player whose violent act isn't off-court, but whose penalty shocks even the union. In January 2005, during a late-game possession against the Grizzlies, Kobe Bryant rises for a jumper and extends his right elbow into Mike Miller's face. The contact occurs mid-air, and Miller collapses immediately. Officials call a standard foul, but league review upgrades the play to a flagrant one the next day. Bryant receives a 2-game suspension without pay, a costly blow as the Lakers sit 9th in the Western Conference standings, trying to claw into playoff position. Bryant insists the elbow is incidental, citing his natural shooting motion and lack of intent. But the NBA's disciplinary team references slow-motion replays that show Bryant clearly looking back at Miller mid-flight before extending the elbow. It's his second such incident that season, prompting concern that Bryant is towing the line between competitive aggression and recklessness. The Lakers ultimately miss the postseason, and the suspension becomes part of a season-long unraveling following Shaquille O'Neal's departure. The next high-profile elbow wouldn't cost a playoff berth, but it would knock out a reigning MVP. If you made it this far, you're one of the real ones. At BBall Decoded, we don't sugarcoat the past. We break it down, team by team, draft by draft, mistake by mistake. If you love deep NBA stories, critical breakdowns, and raw basketball truth, hit that like button, subscribe for more team deep dives, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.